Sometimes it occurs to me that perhaps the games which I remember to be great only hold such high praise in my opinion due to the technological advancements they made versus the limitations of my hardware at the time. There is something about a game not running well on a PC which, in my mind at least, has always managed to give it a little bit more credibility than perhaps it is worth. The only way, of course, to find out if this is the case is to go back and replay these games on a computer that can fart out graphics, no questions asked. And a game that has been rattling around in the back of my mind for quite some time now is Project I.G.I. I'm Going In, as it is sometimes referred to, was released in late 2000 by Norwegian developer Loop, who are commonly praised for their flight simulator game Joint Strike Fighter. Despite being a first-person shooter, I.G.I actually uses the same engine as Joint Strike Fighter, and this is no more apparent than in the opening visuals. When you start the game, the first vista you are treated to is a sprawling landscape complete with draw distance and a traversing helicopter. Inside is our main protagonist and playable character, David Llewellyn-Jones, who, whilst he sounds like a member of parliament, is a one-man infiltration army being sent to capture Proboy, who is believed to know the knowledge to the whereabouts of nuclear weaponry. After jumping from a helicopter to a train in scenes resembling Skyfall, had it been on a budget of around £3.50, we are given our mission briefing by Anya, a woman who seems to have rigor mortis for hands.
And extract him for debriefing.
I talk dismissively about the game's premise, and it isn't really where the experience lies. The meat and potatoes here, as with most FPS games, are with the levels and weapons. Now, obviously, this doesn't look too amazing these days, but 15 years ago to see a game with such an expansive area to explore that wasn't confined to corridors was something of a rarity. What also made this different from other FPS games at the time was how the levels had you tackle them. Each mission starts by plonking you down in a predetermined part of the map near an enemy base, and with a questionable amount of freedom, lets you choose how you go about getting around and completing your objectives. With that said, there is quite a large emphasis on taking things stealthy. Missions usually start you with at least one silenced weapon, and in an attempt for realism, your character can't take more than a few bullets before you have to start right over from the beginning of the level. This is probably I.G.I.'s most spawned complaint. There is no mid-level saves or checkpoints. You either get through your mission or you start over. I actually quite like this, but I'll come back to why as I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Most all of the game's 14 levels come with a different variation of the same world obstacles and mission objectives. They all revolve around infiltration of an enemy base, which is quarantined by barbed wire fences, guard towers, patrolling infantry and security cameras. Along with this, you come equipped with a map reader to tell you the location of your next objective, and it's up to you to dispose of the guards that sit in your way. Although saying guards, plural, could be a bit misleading, clones will be better suited due to the fact that they're almost all the same, and they're equally as stupid. Sometimes enemies will just stand still when you shoot them, or watch their best friend die in front of them completely unfazed. Likewise, enemies can also have super sensing abilities, and can spot you from 10 miles down the road with almost perfect accuracy. Luckily, however, due to the brilliant sound design and pleasing animation, the guns are always fun to fire, despite how poorly executed the thing you are shooting at is. Also deterring you from victory is each base's security system. This is triggered by prolonged exposure to security cameras, or by letting one of the guards get away for too long to hit the alarm, or sometimes just because you looked at the building a bit funny. When the alert is heightened, everyone in the vicinity is aware of your presence, and the game reverts back to its old school shooter roots, having you blast away through countless amounts of enemies and ammunition as you flee to your next objectives. It isn't, however, always as simple as killing everyone in the area, as certain locations have infinitely respawning enemies running out of bunker doors, leaving you no other option than to hightail it as quickly as you can before you run out of firepower. It certainly occurred to me whilst making notes about Project I.G.I. that rather than sounding interesting, it's sounding pretty annoying. And it is, in fact it can be, infuriating. Getting so close to the end of a level only to be killed in the cheapest way possible happens more often than is forgivable. And cheap deaths are 10 a penny in this game due to an oddly present mechanic that allows you to shoot through anything wooden. Which, if the AI decides it can see you through a wall, means game over before you've even had a chance to fire blindly back in retaliation. Also, weapon variations, as fun as they are to shoot, don't really hold any difference in impact, with perhaps the exception of the shotgun. All weapons seem to do the same damage, just with a difference in accuracy, the sniper rifle being the exception as the only weapon that has the ability to aim down the sights. So, the AI's rubbish, the guns can be redundant, the levels are samey, and there are cheap deaths. So why did I enjoy playing it? Well, after doing about 3 missions, it occurred to me, this isn't a first-person shooter. Not really. It's more of a puzzle game. I know that sounds a bit silly, because it clearly is a first-person shooter. However, that's not how you end up playing it, and as unintentional as I believe it to be, that's what kept me playing. When you start to get into the game, you will slowly stop seeing enemies as enemies. They're more like obstacles, like sort of a switch that has to be turned off in order to progress. But it's finding out the order in which you need to turn them off, which is the challenge. A challenge that wouldn't be present had the game included the save function. This makes it more of a trial and error experience, as dying is quite easy. You'll get a little further each time, learning enemy placements and knowing where to pick them off from without getting too close, which means eventually with practice, some levels can be completed in only a few minutes. That's not to say that you can't go in all guns blazing though. More often than not, a perfectly thought out plan will go sour and you'll be forced to crack out the grenade launcher. But as constant gunplay doesn't become your sole purpose, it doesn't become too boring. As the levels progress, we get some variation in mission objectives and locations, primarily in form of escort or cover based missions, thrown in with a few tank battles and an underground complex. FPS gameplay aside, this is still a really pleasing game to run around in, and this is due to some great music and sense of freedom. I actually drew an odd comparison whilst playing Project I.G.I, and that was with DayZ of all games. Both games have a sprawling landscape populated by square buildings with almost no items or furniture in, with enemies that only seem to notice you when they feel like it, and you can't take more than a few bullets before the game is over. Or possibly, I have just played too much DayZ, and everything now seems to draw resemblance, to the point where I actually seek out good vantage points in the real world. Getting slightly off track there. So to come back to my original question, whether the game still holds as much quality as I thought it did when I first played it, no. It most definitely does not. But I do like it, and I like it now for completely different reasons than I did when it was first released. Back then, I remember thinking it was super realistic, all the buildings were to scale, it was outdoors, realistic guns, and you died easy. Dying easy in the game always seemed to me to be rooted in some sort of logic rather than being a bullet sponge. Whilst some of those facts do still remain true, they don't give the game the same status I once believed. Fortunately now though, I do see it positively in a different light. It was trying to do something different, and whether it meant to or not, it turned out to be something rather unique. In the end though, I don't think I could give it an overall recommendation. The things I like about the game seem to be all of its shortcomings, which probably to the average gamer would seem laughable, but if you are of a like-minded nature and enjoy the era of shooters where they were all trying to do something a little bit different, I would give it a go. Unfortunately, Project I.G.I doesn't exist in any digital form, not to my knowledge anyway. I actually found my copy in a charity shop for £1, but you can pick it up off Amazon or eBay for a pittance, so you won't break the bank. As always, thank you very much for watching, and a genuine question here, what is the sequel like? Because I noticed it's up on GOG.com, and I've never actually played it.